So Premier Clark, a couple of general questions to start. What do you think is the largest economic threat to the province over the next 4 years?
The NDP. I think, they've spent the last 4 years in my first term of government trying to figure out how they're going to kill jobs in every corner of the province, cancelling Site C, stopping LNG, stopping infrastructure like the George Massey Bridge. That is the single biggest threat. Now, putting aside the politics for a second,
let's deal with
the biggest external threat is the protectionism in the United States. And, I think the question for us in this election is who is going to be best to be able to defend, protect, and secure jobs for people in British Columbia? Who's going to fight hard? Who's going to have the patience, the plan, the ability to, keep our tempers in difficult times? And I think that's the central question in this election, because the Americans have gone after aluminum. They've gone after forestry. They've gone after agriculture. What's next? Is it technology? Is it our tech sector? Is it our financial sector? BC needs a fighter, somebody who's going to lead the fight to protect jobs. And
so what's our greatest opportunity in the next 4 years?
I think our greatest opportunity is trade in Asia. And so, we've doubled the amount of trade that we do with China, increased it by 2,000%. That's more than double. We need to keep growing that. So what we need to do is we need to support, and we are, more trade missions, more investment in our foreign sales force out there. We've doubled that. So India is a huge untapped opportunity for us. Korea is growing. Japan is growing. And of course, China, there's just no end to it's almost unlimited, our potential there. Let's make ourselves even less dependent on the Americans. So the next time the next softwood deal comes up, maybe it's not such a problem for us.
What's the best way to open up those opportunities in Asia? Would it be trade missions or other opportunities?
Yeah, well, it's both, right? So I think part of it is trade missions. I mean, that's when I'm the number one salesperson for British Columbia out there pitching jobs and all the opportunities that we have here. But we've also doubled the number of trade offices that we have. So we have a sales force on the ground that's double the size. We've opened trade offices in India for the first time. And that's helping small and medium-sized businesses especially make connections with people who want their stuff. I mean, 1.5 billion people in India, almost the same number in China. There is an unlimited potential for our small businesses out there, but they don't necessarily have the marketing expertise or staff to be able to go out there and do that. That's where the government comes in.
The Mayor's Council this week released a kind of a checklist, a scorecard, if you want to call it, on congestion. And it was very NDP friendly. If you were to infer who they were supporting, it would be John Horgan. What's wrong with the dialogue, in your view, between the province and the regional mayors around transportation? Why isn't it working?
Well, I think, some of the mayors have an agenda. I think, though, also, some of the mayors would also just like the province to pay for everything. I mean, remember this. Vancouver, the Lower Mainland, is the only place in the province where local taxpayers don't pay a hospital tax. Every other part of the province, local taxpayers pay to build hospitals, but not here anymore. And all of that money went over to TransLink. And, my view is, and, I'm at odds with some of the mayors on this, for sure. I don't think that politicians should be coming up with more ways to add taxes to people. We should be being imaginative about how we can keep taxes down. You know why some of the folks at TransLink really like the NDP? Because he has said that he will allow them free rein to raise taxes, an unelected body to go and raise taxes on the people of Vancouver. No referendum. And I am committed that unelected body will not raise people's taxes without people getting a say through a referendum.
On the topic of politicians adding more taxes, what are your thoughts on some of the municipal taxes that have come online to address affordable housing, Airbnb being one, or the empty homes tax?
We gave the city of Vancouver the right to be able to do the empty homes tax. They'd asked us to do it, the province, and we studied it long and hard. We studied all of the suggestions that everybody'd made. That was one that was just, we didn't feel like there was a way to really make it work. Maybe the city of Vancouver could make it work. I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. I think it's great to open up more homes for people to be able to rent. And nobody wants to live in a neighborhood that nobody lives in. You don't want to be the last guy on the street. But I think, we'll see if it works. And, that's why we gave them the power to do it. I think, though, we should be cautious about dumping more taxes on people. And, the thing about the housing issue in Vancouver is that because it's only the province that has stepped up to do anything about it, we've had to really focus on the tax on the demand side, the 15% foreign tax, the luxury tax on homes. We have reduced the property purchase tax in most cases, and we're giving people very no cost loans to get into their first home. But, you can only do so much on that side. The local governments have to address the supply issue. If there's a problem finding a place to rent, it's because mayors and their councils haven't zoned places for rental. That's something the province can't control. So one of my top priorities, should I be reelected, is getting to work with mayors and making sure that they're keeping their end of the bargain, because we all know supply and demand.
But you
can't just control demand.
You're a consummate at making sure that you don't have to deliver difficult news to certain constituents. The mayors would have to deliver a lot of difficult news to constituents in order to get the density in some neighborhoods that you know of in this city would be necessary in order to effectively accommodate all the new population.
I would say I've gotten a lot more accustomed to delivering difficult news. And I can say, Kirk, that was from when I was first elected in 2011 till we balanced our first budget. We've done 5 now, but boy, those were tough years.
And what is Christy Clark like in a room where there is difficult news to deliver? What face do you put on? What your first couple of lines?
What I try and say to people is I try and identify our common interest. And so I think one of the reasons that I won the election in 2013, despite the fact that it had been a lot of difficult news for 2 years, is I think British Columbians understood the common value that we had, which was to get the economy back on track. Even though, the outcome of that was sometimes tough decisions, I think people were prepared to make those sacrifices because they wanted to, and look at where we are now. Because British Columbians made those sacrifices, fastest growing economy in Canada, lowest unemployment in Canada, most number of jobs created in the country by a long shot. That's the result of the hard work that British Columbians did when we were delivering more difficult news.
Where's the common value or the common interests between the BC Liberals and millennial voters?
Well, millennial voters want to have opportunities, one. And, the more jobs we're creating, the more opportunities people have. I mean, when you graduate from university, you get your first job. You want that to be at the highest wage it possibly could be. Because when it is, you always go up from there. If you start at 20 grand or you start at 50 grand, it's a big difference. So for millennials, opportunities for jobs. I would say that's the first and most important thing, because that's the way to make life affordable for people. The second thing is reducing and eliminating our debt. They are going to pay for that. I mean, we have just had years of governments in this country who think it's all okay to spend way more than we need. For who? For our generation. But for millennials, they're going to be paying for it. And when they're paying to service that debt, I mean, if we took John Horgan's plan, we would be spending almost $2.3 billion more just in interest payments every year on the increase in the debt. They don't even plan to balance the budget. And so, I feel a real obligation to millennials and to younger people today. Our parents wouldn't want to leave us with debt when they passed away. Why do we want to allow our government to do that?
Premier Clark, one of the issues that millennials are, of course, are going to be looking at over the next while is the determination by the federal government to legalize cannabis. It's trying to work toward, I think, an Cannabis Day in 2018 on July 1st or something. It may not make that target. That being said, there is still a bit of a mess in this city of dispensaries that are unlicensed, aren't paying taxes, as businesses are. They're neighboring businesses. And the city has taken a bit of a blithe position on this. The Prime Minister has said that these ought to be closed. What do you think?
I agree. I think that the approach the city has taken has been really, it's been reckless, because not only are they not, taxed, and not only is it unregulated, they're popping up in neighborhoods near schools and near people's houses. Nobody wants that. And so, now that the federal government is making it legal, we do have an opportunity to do it better. So I will make sure if I'm reelected that we do that. And that means making sure that we keep it out of the hands of kids. That's the number one priority that I have. Making sure that the quality isn't, they're not all filled with toxins for people who need it. and making sure that organized crime stays out of it. I mean, I think those have to be the three priorities. We will ask an expert panel of law enforcement and health to give us the best advice about what we should do, how we should sell it, how we should distribute it. And I'm going to be saying to them, look, here's my number one thing. We're going to keep it out of the hands of your kids.
What are the criteria you're also going to have economically to make sure that it's not just a big cash cow, a milk cow for the province?
Well, we're the only party that's committed to making sure that all the revenues from marijuana don't just go into making a bigger government. If there are revenues from marijuana, and there's significant debate about whether or not there will be, all of it is going to go into health, to protecting people's health. It's going to go into drug education for kids, and it's going to go into law enforcement for the guns and gang strategy. We're not just going to dump this. I'm just not in favor of growing government. And so, every opportunity that we get to cut taxes rather than grow taxes, I think that's what we should do. John Horgan says he's already decided he wants to start selling marijuana in liquor stores. Well, he got $130,000 donation from the BCGEU, and that is not a good enough reason to decide off the top of your head that you want, because nobody else does it that way. Nobody.
From an industry that's on the horizon to one that's growing quite rapidly in BC, what's your strategy for supporting the tech industry, particularly around challenges recruiting talent and seeking funding?
2,000 new STEM seats, so science, technology, engineering, and math. 2,000 new seats at universities to produce that talent. That's a huge investment for us, and we're very focused in that. And we also want to make sure that we're supporting co-op programs. So everybody will have to do a co-op program if you're in a tech-related training at university. And we are going to make sure that every child in British Columbia who graduates from our public schools is an expert in coding. So we're going to make sure that everybody has to learn how to code, girls and boys. So it'll be gender equal. And that'll I think it'll put BC on the map in a big way, but it will also mean that way more young people are exposed to the tech industry early on, and they're way more skilled when they graduate.
What's the relationship like between BC and the federal government when it comes to climate change and carbon taxing?
Well, we're the leaders in the country on that. So they've been looking to us, I think, to set an example in Canada, and we're happy to do that. Nobody else has a $30 a ton carbon tax today in North America. So, we've been recognized by the United Nations as a climate leader not because we're dumping a new tax on people just on top of all the other taxes, which has a huge impact on killing jobs. We have taken every penny from carbon tax and reinvested it in cutting people's taxes. So we tax pollution, don't want that. We lighten the tax burden on wealth and jobs, which is something that we do want. But there is one thing. When Ottawa came up with this pan-Canadian climate plan, I was very careful to carve out a side deal that will allow us, not Ottawa, in 2021 to decide what we are going to do next in terms of protecting our climate and meeting our climate goals. We are not going to have Ottawa dictate to British Columbia about what our taxes should be. We are the leader. We have more experience in this than anybody else. So that decision is going to be made in British Columbia, and we are going to choose the method to reduce our emissions that is going to be the most economically good for our province, and that's going to have the biggest impact.
Is there anything positive about the Trump administration for British Columbia?
I hold out hope that because Donald Trump is a builder, he will understand intuitively that it is just nuts to choke off the supply of Canadian lumber. I mean, they're 15 billion board feet short this year. All that's going to do is raise the price of housing for people in the middle class. And he will intuitively understand that one of the primary drivers of American economic growth is residential housing starts. So I hold out hope that part of Donald Trump and the people around him will hold sway on this, and we might get to a deal faster. He talks a lot about caring about the economy. So that's positive. And the thing about President Obama, I really liked him. I thought he was a great guy, or he seemed like a great guy. But, he never was interested in getting a deal on softwood. He just never was. So I think, new administration, new opportunity.
Premier Clark, I want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.